Okay, so just while Jonathan gets his slides ready, good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel, and I'll be your webinar moderator today. Today's webinar is sponsored by Nat Road's Platinum partner, PACCAR and the Dealer Network. Whether it's moving freight across the nation or going the last mile, their DAF trucks are always delivering. Now, let me introduce our guest speaker, Jonathan Davey, Senior Policy Analyst from the National Transport Commission. In this webinar, Jonathan will be briefing on the review of assessing fitness to drive, which is currently underway, and share an approach to how the issues may be resolved. Like always, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question for Jonathan, please feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. You may send through your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll be answering questions at the end of the session. Okay, so let's kick things off by welcoming Jonathan Davey. Jonathan, over to you.
Great, thanks, Rachel, and I'd just like to thank Nat Roads for the opportunity to present today. So the NTC is currently undertaking its periodical review of assessing fitness to drive, and this presentation is to give an update of that progress to Nat Roads members in the lead up to our public consultation, which will open on the 3rd of May, or early May, we're expecting. So the National Transport Commission and Austroads are reviewing the medical standards that inform private and commercial driver licensing. The purpose of the review is to ensure that these standards represent medical best practice, are up to date, and meet the needs of the target audience. As part of this review, we are also studying implementation options to help improve the knowledge and use of medical standards in the community, and specifically in the health practitioner community, and support medical fitness to drive assessment process. The last substantive review of assessing fitness to drive occurred in 2016. So the primary purpose of assessing fitness to drive is to increase road safety in Australia by assisting health professionals to assess the fitness of their patients in a consistent and appropriate manner, promote the responsible behaviour of patients regarding their medical fitness and their ability to drive, conduct medical examinations for the licensing of drivers as required by state and territory driver licensing agencies or authorities, provide information to inform the decisions on conditional licenses, recognise the extent and limits of professional and legal obligations with respect to reporting around fitness to drive. And the publication also aims to provide guidance to driver licensing authorities when making their licensing decisions. So the scope of our review will include considering advances in consensus knowledge and medical practice to update the standards, to understand if there are new issues affecting medical standards for driving, any substantial changes to the driving environment that need to be accounted for in assessing fitness to drive, stakeholder feedback on the operation of the current guidelines, and also findings of any recent relevant inquiries. And we've arranged to have a coronial report for fatal crashes which might have resulted from someone's medical condition. What the review is not considering is any emergent research into medical conditions. So we're really focused on a consensus body of scientific evidence or a consensus of medical expert opinion. We're not considering any changes to reporting requirements of medical professionals or any changes to the regulatory responsibilities or positioning in the document. We're not examining the variance that exists between jurisdictions in regarding to implementation of assessing fitness to drive, and we're not considering any significant shifts in the application of the medical standards. So just to give an overview of the process of the review and where we're at. So we kicked off the project in July and September. And part of this, the second phase, was an issue identification phase, which involved a targeted stakeholder consultation, which Nat Rhodes was part of. We invited stakeholders across government, the medical profession, public health groups, industry and academia to provide issues for consideration in the update of assessing fitness to drive. We are now currently in our medical review phase and developing the update. So we are liaising with subject matter experts and other stakeholders to resolve the issues and develop the updates that are required for assessing fitness to drive. And we're preparing the draft material for the update and the new edition for assessing fitness to drive, as well as a review report, which will be released in public consultation explaining the issues and changes that we've made. So phase 4, which will start in May, is the public consultation and seeking expert endorsement. So the review report and the draft assessing fitness to drive will be released for public feedback, and that will last, and that will be open for comment for 6 weeks. And then finally, from September through November, we'll be looking for approval from our authorising bodies. So this is consideration at the Infrastructure and Transport Senior Officials Committee, and then consideration by Infrastructure and Transport Ministers in November. And once that process is finished and if the update is approved, then publication should happen shortly after that, which we'll be working with Austros to deliver the new version of Assessing Fitness to Drive. So just to give an overview of the stakeholder consultation that we performed. So 72 organisations were invited to provide issues as part of their submissions. So this was government agencies, medical specialties, public health groups, industry and academia. We received 46 submissions, 18 medical associations, 8 public health groups, 7 were from government agencies, 5 from industry and 2 from academia. And all up, we received 378 issues for consideration in this update of Assessing Fitness to Drive. And there's a breakdown on the right of organisation type of the areas we received issues from. Predominantly, the overwhelming majority was from government agencies, and this is mostly the driver licensing authorities, followed by the medical associations, then public health groups, industry and academia. So the way that we consider and review the issues that were put to us is that we have a sort of 4 overarching criteria for review: whether the issue itself falls within the scope of our review, which I went through earlier, whether the issue currently aligns with the purpose of the standards, or if it's a small modification, then it does align with the standards and we can just proceed with that. There are issues that require expert review from medical specialists and fitness to drive specialists, as well as other issues which of a certain complexity, which we establish working groups around. And then further to this assessment process, in deciding around how we progress and resolve an issue, we seek to understand if there's any evidence of a road safety risk or issue. And this is generally the scientific literature trying to understand what a motor vehicle crash risk might be, or if there's any evidence of on-road safety performance issues. We also rely on subject matter expertise in areas where it might not be as clear-cut, so the expert opinion of medical professional colleges and other fitness to drive experts. We're also reviewing the international standards that exist, as these are updated frequently as well, and a source of guidance for us in dealing with some of these issues. And then we also examine the outcomes from past reviews, because some of the issues that we receive are recurrent issues, and we just seek to understand if much has changed in the intervening years to warrant a different response. So just to give you an idea of the organisations who we're going to for subject matter expertise and consultation, there's a list on the right, including the Royal Australian College of GPs, the College of Ophthalmologists, Psychiatrists, the Australian Diabetes Society, the Cardiovascular Society of Australia and New Zealand, the Australian Sleep Association, and a number of other organisations. And just to give you a snapshot of the number of submitted issues and the areas which these tended to fall under, if we organise it by the chapters that exist in the medical standards for assessing fitness to drive, the overwhelming majority is surrounding neurological conditions, specifically epilepsy and seizures, though there are other issues as well for these chapters. Then vision and cardiovascular conditions and substance misuse, sort of rounding out the top 4 of issues that we've received. And just to delve into this a little bit more, some of the issues we've received about the general information in Part A of assessing fitness to drive is requests and further clarity on how a medical practitioner can perform an assessment and support for cases which aren't laid out specifically in the medical information chapter. Clarification of reporting responsibilities and what options are available for a medical practitioner if they need to report someone's medical condition, and also some requests about ways to improve medical assessment forms and applicability of medical assessment forms. And a lot of these issues that we've received really come down to what we've identified as working out a better way to implement and promote assessing fitness to drive and the information that's already there. A number of the issues that we receive, the underlying theme is that there is information in assessing fitness to drive, but it's not necessarily being reviewed or consulted in addressing some of these problems. And we need to work out a better way to highlight that to help people find the solutions they're looking for. And then in terms of some of the medical issues that we've received and working through is that we've been asked for guidance on the use of medicinal cannabis. And we've actually established a working group to define what kind of guidance we should provide for prescription medicinal cannabis. One of the other recurring issues and across different medical types and also over sort of past reviews is access to specialists. And we're working out with the specialty colleges to identify the messaging we need to provide where ongoing review after initial assessment has been performed by a specialist could potentially be carried out in the general practitioner's office. Also trying to provide further guidance around assessing exceptional circumstances for people who don't quite meet the standards but might be able to drive safely. Issues around low vision and driving, issues around substance misuse and evidence of remission and treatment, and also providing some guidance on mild cognitive impairment. So before a diagnosis of dementia, but where there might be some cognitive impairment which may cause fitness to drive issues. And so I just wanted to highlight here some of the issues that have been provided from representative groups of the heavy vehicle industry. So one of the recurring issues that we've received has been that the NTC should consider having separate projects that clearly distinguishes a fitness for duty standard from the assessing fitness to drive. Assessing fitness to drive really is focused on assessing medical conditions for driver licensing rather than as a fitness for duty standard. We've also received feedback that the medical fitness to drive standards are not well suited for managing fitness to drive in the heavy vehicle industry, and that the areas of risk that are not well covered in assessing fitness to drive are sleep disorders and specifically sleep apnea and testing for sleep apnea, diabetes and testing for diabetes, and cardiovascular disease and managing cardiovascular disease. And also that there's generally that the requirements for operating a heavy vehicle are not well understood by medical practitioners. So as part of the NTC's work program, we've actually started as part of the HVNL law review there's a project as part of that package to address these very issues. So this is nominally the driver medical standard. It's been proposed as part of the package in the HVNL review. The standard would draw on assessing fitness to drive as a primary source of medical standards, but then go beyond and further and build on assessing fitness to drive with tailored criteria and assessment requirements, potentially incorporating proactive screening for conditions, and potentially addressing areas that are not considered as a licensing matter. So assessing fitness to drive will continue to operate independently of whatever package or whatever project may be developed, and to continue supporting private and commercial driver licensing decisions made by driver licensing authorities. So the details of this project are not yet have not yet been finalised, and we're waiting for approval from transport ministers at their meeting in May to then go ahead and develop this standard. So, and just to give you an overview of the upcoming important dates as far as assessing fitness to drive is concerned for the review, we're going to start our public consultation in May, which will run through June. So that'll go for 6 weeks. This will be in the lead up to seeking approval at the next Infrastructure and Transport Ministers meeting in November, and then looking at publication of the next version later this year in December. And look, thank you everyone. I'm available to answer any questions that I can help you with.
Thank you, Jonathan. We'll now start with some questions submitted prior to today's presentation. If you do have any questions, again, feel free to enter them into the Q&A section. So, Jonathan, our first question is, whilst AFTD doesn't stand as a fitness for duty standard, in practice, it is often used for that purpose. Are any of the changes proposed going to make it more usable as a fitness for duty standard?
So I guess the short answer is no. The primary focus of assessing fitness to drive will remain on driver licensing decisions. But I think, as you can see just from what we've proposed, that there is now this separate work program to specifically develop a fitness for duty and health management standard for the heavy vehicle industry, which will hopefully address a lot of the gaps that are created by assessing fitness to drive for a fitness for duty standard for the heavy vehicle industry. So hopefully with that program, a lot of those issues can be solved.
Will the AFTD be the basis on which any reformed fitness for duty standard is measured?
So assessing fitness to drive will go ahead independently, and I guess it can be considered as one of the information sources, so that in any fitness for duty standard, a lot of that work around identifying motor vehicle crash risk or on-road safety risk or other issues for road safety performance doesn't need to be performed again, and it can be drawn on, and assessing fitness to drive would be a plug-in to any fitness for duty standard, which would then build on and have more stringent thresholds or more tailored responses around some of the conditions that are identified in assessing fitness to drive. That's the approach that we're thinking, but as yet it hasn't been finalised, and we're waiting for approval before we carry forward in any further design.
Okay, thanks for that. We've got a few questions that were submitted during the webinar. The first one is, will the document deal with COVID and its effects?
No, the document's not going to deal with COVID. Generally, assessing fitness to drive is for permanent or chronic medical conditions, which are a licensing issue. I guess the majority of people do recover from COVID. For people who may have ongoing, I guess there's long COVID symptoms, that would be assessing fitness to drive does have general principles that any medical condition can be assessed against. What it does is it highlights the ones most understood to have an impact for road safety, but for other clinical circumstances, there are guidelines that any medical condition can be assessed against. And I guess that's where any sort of COVID impacts if it was a chronic condition, could be assessed against, but any short-term acute condition is not covered by assessing fitness to drive, as it's not considered a licensing matter.
Thank you for that. Next question is from Tina Smith. Will weight be included in the fitness to drive? It is my understanding that the maximum weight of a driver's seat is around 150 kilos.
Weight is not currently included. As far as we understand it, it's not considered as a road and a driving issue in terms of the ability to be able to drive. I guess a specific issue like that would look to be carried or handled in any actual fitness to duty standard, where the ergonomics of the vehicle and the cab itself becomes an issue.
Okay, we've got one last question from Jeffrey Edwards. Some of our drivers require multiple medicals to be conducted. For example, a dangerous goods license medical, a driver's license medical, a BFM medical, and mine site order 43 medical. Will the review take this into consideration?
So I guess in terms of assessment and what's accepted is one assessment in a different area is then acceptable for assessing fitness to drive. We're not considering that. That would really be something that would need to take up with the driver licensing authorities about whether they'd be willing to carry over and recognise different assessments. We understand that this is an issue and potentially something that would be looked at in the health standard about how to manage so that there's not an nth number of assessments and potentially they'd be able to be carried over. But that's something that's to be worked out and not specifically looked at in assessing fitness to drive, and sort of is more, would be something that we would need to discuss thoroughly with each state and territory to understand what assessment they'd be willing to take, willing to accept, and the time frame for that.
And one last question quickly sneaking through. Will the NTC separately quantify the difference in licensing requirements, RE health, between states?
Sorry, I'm not quite so... Sorry, would you mind repeating the question again?
Okay. Yeah. Will the NTC separately quantify the difference in licensing requirements, RE health, between states?
So we try and set a standard which can be used with national consistency. If the states apply that differently, that is really not part of the scope of assessing fitnesses to drive's work. And we do try and discuss consistent implementation. But at the end of the day, the states are the final decision makers on licensing. And it's up to them to apply the standards and to consider the medical assessments as they see fit.
Okay, so that's all our questions. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, please email info@natroad.com.au. Today's webinar will be uploaded to the website and to our YouTube channel. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have a great day.
Great, thank you very much.